live yet? Are we live yet? Are we live yet? And 3, 2, 1. Good morning, world. Cold Crash Faster Stout. Hey, look at that. We already got some people tuning in. Welcome, everyone, to the Genus Brewing live stream today.
Fingers crossed I can get my computer going.
It's all right. We got backups here. Oh, I got to push play, too. Is that going to be soundy?
Probably. Maybe. I don't know.
Sounds good. Not that we really need to watch ourselves. I think we know what's going on.
Yeah, but it kind of helps, you know.
All right.
For those of you who have not seen a live stream yet, kind of our format is we talk about a little bit of beer or in-house brewery Genus news. Then we go into our beer of the week, and then we finish out with one or two discussion topics. And finally, I guess we wouldn't have finished out with the discussion topics because after that we have Q&A. So if you've seen the title, you already know that today's topic is all about mashing and mashing techniques. Hopefully you can get some good information to make your next mash go smoothlier. Much more smoothlier? Much better smoothlier.
Super smoothlier.
Yeah.
Smoothlier like a smoothie IPA smooth.
Like a baby's smoothie IPA.
Oh, God. I hope those don't become a thing, honestly.
Baby food smoothie IPAs.
Look at that. All right. So we got 50 of you watching, so let's go ahead and get started.
Yeah.
So we have some Genus news this week. Just a few kind of, I guess, basic beer stuff, really.
Yeah, we did a collab beer. That's our third in a row collab beer with Alex Roush of Four Eyed Guys. That is taken off today. It's in the fermenter. It's going to be a delightful, summery, refreshing beer.
So, yeah, kind of from what I saw yesterday, you guys were kind of throwing a sort of West Coast hop bill at it, but then I think you hit it with some Quake yeast, right?
Yeah, Quake yeast, and we also used a little bit of fruit juice concentrate. So the idea behind that is
that was
get a nice, subtly fruity, bright beer, and then we also are going to probably take some of that and shandy it, by which we mean add some lemonade to it and get it nice and carbonated. Yeah,
they threw me off. They brought up a sample of the wort, and I'm like, why does this smell like limes?
Fruit juice. So, it is really cool.
So that one's going to be a really fun one. I'm actually excited to see how that turns out since we're kind of blending 3 different beer styles in one.
Yeah.
Otherwise, like you all kind of said, because you gave us the likes on the 2-barrel Unitank video, we now have a second Unitank. Thanks for that. We are now in debt. So
you're welcome. You're welcome, world. Now we get to make more beer.
It will be good in the long run. Our accountant isn't so happy with us, but
hey, we got one of our bright tanks gone, and we're gonna have another one of our fermenters gone, or 1-barrel fermenters gone, so it'll all be good.
Yep. Also on the downturn, Peter broke our hop freezer, so now we have all of our hops thrown in our walk-in in a complete array of disorganization. So
yeah, apparently I broke it by Logan shoving a mallet at the fan a bunch of times and totally doing the right thing for maintenance.
Nah, it's an old freezer. Luckily, it was just our fan motor that went out, which we got one ordered yesterday. So
high elbow.
High elbow. We gotta can't do that anymore. So hopefully we'll get that sorted out by crossing my fingers next week.
Side note, if any of you guys know a really good source for stand-up freezers or have an extra one lying around, feel free to hit us up.
Yeah, especially all you in New Zealand and Europe, and just send it right over. We'll take it from you.
And yes, this is moonshine I'm drinking. It's gonna be a wild morning.
Also, for new beers that we put on tap, we have a couple of absolutely delicious ones.
Really delicious.
A 10%, 10.8, I think, percent Imperial IPA.
We've just been going hard with those big beers, just trying to push them out.
And then we finally tapped the IPK is, I guess, what we're calling it, the India Pale Kolsch.
Yeah, so Kolsch based, not too much different from a regular West Coast IPA other than the fact that we use a little bit of corn in the mash. But we did use those classic kind of like Saaz derivative New Zealand hops, which gives it just a beautiful fruitiness with a citrus tone. It's gorgeous.
Yep. So perfect summer beer if you're looking to kind of tone down your hazy and do something that's a little more sessionable.
Yeah.
And then we got Wib 6 up finally.
Yeah. I know all of you guys, all 2,000 of you that have watched it so far have been waiting for it.
and we did a random video of just general tips on how to improve your brewing practices, which for some reason is exploding, and
Yeah, we've got some controversial comments in the comment section below that too. A lot of people are like, I disagree with you. Which, by the way, our philosophy is it's always cool to disagree. We like that everyone makes beer differently. I think that's what makes beer so great for everybody. So Yeah,
There's
no harm there.
there's always more than one way to do things.
Absolutely.
All right.
That's it for our Genus news. So now it's time for our
Beer of the Week.
Bum, 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 beer of the week. Boop.
All right, and I guess we're kind of recapping one we did a little while ago, but doing a different take on it, and that is going to be an American Amber Ale.
Yeah, the last time we did something like this, we really took that kind of what we call the American Red approach, where it's going to be more piney and hoppy and more aggressive, but there is another side to the American Amber Ale where it can be softer and sweeter, but still showcase American hops in a different way.
So this one, for our malt of the week to start out with, before we get too far into the hops and yeast, which are going to be a little bit different than you might be used to, we're going to go with some Caravienne.
Yeah, so Caravienne is really good for getting that base color. It's also really similar to like a Cara Red, and the cool thing about Caravienne is it has some of those kind of crystal tones, but with more unique like fig and date undertones, and then it's also not super sweet like a pure crystal malt, so it's kind of a hybrid between like a caramel and a Vienna or Munich style malt. And
it will give you a beautiful light red color to the beer as well, which will help kind of build that whole amber ale profile that you're going for. The one we carry here is from Briess. Am I correct there?
Yeah, we carry Briess's Caramel Vienna.
Yeah, Briess Caramel Vienna. It falls in that range of right around 20 Lovibond, which is where most of them should be. You might see some slightly darker variations of that.
Yeah, so you can go ahead and use a slightly higher percentage, maybe up to 20% for this Caravienne. And then if you need to pop that red color a little bit more, maybe hit it with something that's on the darker end of the spectrum, like a tiny, tiny bit of Special B or something, just for some more flavor intrigue.
But yeah, otherwise...
What's up, Dr. Hans?
Otherwise, a very nice malt. You don't have that cloying sweetness that you'll get from a lot of standard crystal malts. So a fantastic substitute if you're trying to do something a little bit different. Building on that sweetness, let's talk about our hop of the week, because this is actually not a traditional hop that you're going to see in an American Amber.
Yeah, so when you're thinking of the hops that you're looking for, you're really going for a subtle hint of citrus, and pretty much that's what you want. You want the hops to shine and be a little bit bright, but not usually overly aggressive. This week we're going with Aquanaut, because that also has a little bit of fruitiness and herbaceousness, herbality. One of those two words sounds like it's real. But if you use Aquanaut in the right way, that subtle fruitiness that it gets off can actually complement that Caravienne really well and give you a more dynamic beer.
Yeah, so you're going to use this. You're not going to throw a ton of hops at it like you would with an IPA. So, hopping rates on a 5-gallon batch, you're probably going to be shooting in that wheelhouse of maybe 2-ish ounces. And one of the nice things about Aquanaut is that it does actually have a fairly high amount of cohumulone. So it's got a little bit of that co-bite, which is typical of kind of any American-style beer. So, things that we always, throw out, things like Centennial, Chinook, and Columbus are really high in that, and that's what gives you that sort of like lingering bitterness.
Yeah, that extra aggression, assertion. I like to call it assertion.
Yeah, exactly. It's an assertive bitterness, but words are hard.
There are many other words.
As for a little background on Aquanaut, it is actually a daughter of Warrior. Turns out, so that explains also why you have that little bit of co-bite that you'll get from it.
Warrior, and then some wild unnamed hybrid that's probably similar to Warrior, but like a wild Warrior where it kind of developed some other fun flavors to breed in. Yeah,
exactly. And this is something that always surprises me with hops too. Is how old they are. So we think of even today as Aquanaut as being a new
relatively
hop.
New, yeah.
And while it was released in 2014, which is not that long ago, it was actually selected out of its breeding program way back in 2003 to actually prop up. And that's why for a good hop variety, you end up actually paying quite a bit of money for it. And it's not necessarily, I know people kind of are like, oh man, it's trademarked. Why is it so expensive? Blah, 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 this and that. And it's because somebody actually spent 20 years to actually breed and then propagate that hop up to a point that they have enough to sell. So,
although we might be on a weird part of the cycle, because I feel like when breeding started to get really popular, everyone was like, oh, new hops. And then now we're realizing how many new hops we're flooded with. And so I think, I'm hoping that the breeding slows down a little bit. It might be a little bit too ADD for us to deal with when you're trying to put it into all these beers. But anyways, Aquanaut, fantastic hop to give it that subtle fruitiness, like I said, to balance out the malt sweetness.
Yeah, so I'd probably go maybe a half ounce for bittering, somewhere in there, and then
somewhere between 2 and 3 ounces on the back end, just to kind of round the whole flavor.
A little 10-minute and maybe a flame out, something like that.
Yeah.
And then our hop. Wow, I can't spell words today.
Yeah, and he's definitely spelling words when he's saying them out loud like regular words.
Juice.
Juice is our other hop of the week.
Gin and juice.
No, Juice is the yeast. It's from Imperial. It's the same as London Ale 3 and Y yeast, and I have no idea what in White Labs. Commonly used for a lot of hazies, but what a lot of people don't realize is if used correctly, Juice works like a lot of British ale strains where it has a subtle fruitiness and can make some really clear beer.
Yeah, especially so for a beer like this, I would actually ferment it on the slightly lower end of the spectrum. I know we've fermented it pretty warm, actually pushing even above that 70-degree mark in a few cases. And it really pushes through a nice ester profile that'll complement those fruity hops.
Comment below if you know what that is in Celsius.
Sure. And yeah, so those nice fruity hops in your New England style IPAs. But if you ferment this, say closer to 65, somewhere in that range, then it should actually stay pretty darn clean for you and
have some great balance.
Yeah,
too.
and exactly, and balance out that Caribbean malt, which you obviously want some kind of presence in an American amber ale.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think that sums up our beer of the week. So let's go right on to our topics.
And the name of the entire video that we did, we're talking today about mash techniques and things that you can do to make sure that your mash is going to be as efficient as possible, get all the yield that you want off of your mash, and then also be consistent with the flavors and everything that you're getting off your mash.
Yeah, so let's go on to our first techniques on how to maximize your mashing, and that's going to be understanding liquid flow, and this is always going to depend on your mash tun shape.
That's right. So your mash tun shape, it kind of has two components. One is basically whether it's going to be more vertical or whether it's going to be more horizontal. And it's just really important to understand what this does to your beer and also in relation to your manifold or where the water is exiting. So you got to think of your mash tun in terms of you have water coming in, you have all your grains in between, and then you have water coming out. So a lot of people that have cooler mash tuns only have a single port or a single point of exit on the bottom of their mash tun, which makes it really difficult for the liquid to flow smoothly through the mash tun.
Yeah, so you're gonna want to keep that in mind. Also keep in mind, your dead space, your we're talking about the manifold in there? Or did we talk about that?
Yeah, we got the manifold up here. Yeah,
Yep.
And then we got we can talk about head space and too, like having a head of water above your grains
Yep,
and all that.
having a head of water. So all of that affects your mash, and that's something that you just have to keep in mind on how all that's flowing out, because really that's gonna have a big impact on how much sugar you're rinsing out of your grain bed. And I think that kind of goes on to our next thing, which is a lot of cooler mash tuns are actually really inefficient.
Yep.
Right? Because you're leaving a lot of sugar in that sort of dead space underneath your manifold. You might be drilling through your grain bed if you're sparging too fast.
Yep.
And so a lot of cases, which we see not very many people doing, batch sparging can actually be more efficient than fly sparging.
That's right. If you have an inefficient mash tun, I know a lot of people that do have inefficient mash tuns that think that since on the commercial scale a lot of beer is fly sparged, that fly sparging is just the way to go because it's how the big boys do it. However, if your mash tun is inefficient, doing a batch sparge actually gives you the opportunity to reinfuse new water into your mash and get a new vorlav, a new circulation, and then get the majority of that back out when you empty your mash tun.
Yeah, I know that I brewed on a couple of actually just like Coleman rectangular coolers, and I found that for almost all the beers I brewed, whether I batch sparged or tried to fly sparge, I got more or less the same efficiency out of them, and batch sparging was actually a lot faster to do than fly sparging, which kind of goes into fly sparging, and let's talk about how people often fly sparge way too fast.
Yeah, well, I guess first let's break down what batch sparging and fly sparging is. So for those of you who don't know, and I'm assuming most of you do, what we mean by fly sparging is letting water run into the top of your mash tun at the same time that you're letting wort flow out the bottom. So you have kind of this equilibrium where there's a little bit of head of water on top of all your grains, and then the water that's coming into the top of your grain bed is coming in at the same rate that the water is flowing out of your mash tun. So that's a fly sparge, one fluid motion. With a batch sparge, what we mean is that you're taking all that liquid that's in your grain from your initial mash, you're running all that out, and then you're introducing new water, usually slightly hotter water this time. You're re-stirring your mash, and then you're re-vorlaufing or recirculating your mash to get that same compression and that same filtration that your grain bed's going to offer you before running that second batch out, which is why it's called batch sparging, and into your kettle. So fly sparging, we're talking about that.
So fly sparging, typically you'll want to fly sparge for the better part of an hour to actually completely rinse out your grain bed. And I see a lot of people that'll do this in 15 or 20 minutes and then come in and say, hey man, my efficiencies are only 65%. What's going on? And what's probably going on is you're either you're not allowing enough time for that water to kind of soak up those residual sugars that are in the grain, or you're actually going so fast that you're drilling holes through your grain bed and you're finding spots in that grain bed that are going to have a little less resistance, and you're just sparging right through that same spot instead of having a nice kind of trickle down effect.
Yep. So imagine when you're thinking about how your water is working in your grain, imagine the shape of your manifold or the shape of your false bottom. And you got to understand that there are certain exit points that the water is going down at the very bottom before it exits your mash tun. It's either going through a false bottom or it's going up under your manifold and out the front port where your wort exits. If the suction power for your from your siphon and from running off your wort is too fast, then it's going to try to shoot the water that's on top of your grain bed through the mash too quickly, and it'll be inefficient. You'll get channeling, like you said, or even you'll risk a stuck mash because of all the compression. That has to do with a lot of other things, but just know that fly sparging is something you should do very slowly. And also, another tip for not getting that same channeling and that same potential risk of stuck mash is using
rice holes.
Yeah.
So those are things that, especially in the kind of more vertical systems, the deeper your grain bed, the more this becomes something that you should be doing on a regular basis. And that is adding rice holes to the mash. All this is going to do is fluff up the mash. It creates kind of more interstitial space between all the grains so that you don't end up with, a sort of caking effect. Which is going to plug up your mash, make it so it doesn't drain efficiently.
Yeah, it's going to separate those beta-glucans and make it so that they don't stick together as much, which beta-glucans are a part of what create channeling, again, and then also lowers your efficiency.
If you're wondering what those look like when you recirculate your mash on top of it, if you see these weird kind of almost looks like somebody poured some
egg drop
flour,
soup?
or egg drop soup or some flour in there and it's kind of coagulating. Those are all your proteins, all your beta-glucans that are forming in there, which is a good thing. It's a natural thing, but yeah, those are also what are going to really stick up your mash.
So that's pretty much all we're going to talk about when it comes to the physics of your mash, the how the water drains out. Next, we're just going to go into maybe more of the chemistry of your mash, the biochemistry of your mash. We're going to talk about things like enzymes and other stuff. So speaking of enzymes, let's start with diastatic power. You need to make sure when you're brewing whatever your mash is, that you have either a good range of malts with diastatic power, or you have one workhorse of a malt that's giving you all the diastatic power you need for your entire mash.
Yeah, so typically this won't be an issue for most beer styles. Beer styles that have, fairly low adjunct malts in them, you're going to have plenty of diastatic power from more or less any base malt. But as you go on to a little bit more specialty styles, the New England IPAs like we just talked about, that's when you have to start, really thinking about that when you have, say 40% of unmalted grains in there, of how much enzymes you have, whether you need to do a longer mash in order to give those enzymes a little more time to work, or whether you actually have to add additional enzymes on top of that base malt.
Yeah. So first of all, when it comes to, we've said this before, a lot of times when it comes to New England's, where your adjunct malts, the flake stuff, can be a relatively high percentage, we almost always use Heidelberg just as a base because it's so powerful. It has those good enzymes in it, and it's a really neutral flavor, so it just kind of tastes good too. But yeah, making sure that you have enough diastatic power in there is really good. And if you're worried, make sure you're taking that extra time and starting on that lower end of the mash temperature spectrum, like Logan was saying. Speaking of starting on the lower end of the mash temperature spectrum,
is that to me now?
Yeah, I was trying to, yeah.
You're leading me in.
Trying to.
Yes, also, if you are worried about a beer finishing out, it's always a good idea to start on that low end of the spectrum. Our usually target is about 145 degrees. That's just going to make sure that You're taking it easy on your enzymes. It's about, I think, 152 or 153 that your beta amylase actually starts to denature pretty quickly. And that's kind of why we do that is that way. If we do want to get a full conversion, we're not going to be denaturing that beta amylase. The alpha amylase will still work at those lower temperatures. It'll just take a little longer. But for those of you in the know-how out there, you probably already know that most of those conversions are going to take place within about 20 minutes of your mash rest anyway. So doing that hour-long mash rest, it'll give it plenty of time for both of those enzymes to do their thing.
And if you have the ability, one thing that we like to do is actually ramp our mash temperature during the mash. All this takes with our systems is we run our wort out the bottom of our mash tun. We run it through our wort chiller, actually, which we have stuck in a kettle of nearly boiling water. And so the wort heats up in the wort chiller and then goes back into the top of our mash tun, therefore giving it kind of a heating and recirculating effect at the same time.
So, yeah, that if you do have, a secondary heat source, that's always an option for you. But yeah, otherwise, I think, we just see a lot of people that come in and they're just mashing beers way too high, and then wondering why their final gravities are so high. And usually it's just because you're not, you're mashing too high for that beta amylase, and so you're denaturing it before it has a chance to really break down those long chain sugars.
Yeah, our general rule is if we want thicker beer, we add thicker malts to it. That way, so by mashing low, we kind of cut out the inconsistency of knowing what your mash temperature is doing. We just make sure our mash does as much as possible and then move on. And if we need more body, we add something like chit or oats or whatever.
Yeah. Jason called it, kind of like ERMs. Yes,
that is exactly like a herb. We're trying to speak in everybody's terms, but it's exactly a herbs.
That's what it is. But it's sort of it's a backwoods style ERMs.
Yeah,
without all the super fancy stuff.
It's one that as long as you have a pump and a wort chiller, you can do. Without the fancy system.
Yeah, without spending $2,000 on a system that's designed for it.
But speaking of, increasing your mash temperature during the mash, one thing that is really going to help up your efficiency is actually getting a mash out temperature.
So mash out, the beauty of a mash out, and this is also the beauty, in my opinion, of doing a batch sparge too, right? Because you can actually do a mash out with your batch sparge. And that's just raising that mash temp up to that 170 give or take degree mark Fahrenheit. And what that's going to do is it's just going to allow more of those sugars to be soluble, go into solution. It's also going to kind of loosen up that grain bed. And allow everything to just kind of flow out and drain nicely for you.
Yeah, think of it like when you heat up honey in the microwave or something like that. Obviously, the honey flows a lot better when it's just a little bit warmer. Same kind of thing when you give your mash temperature a couple extra degrees. It gets a lot easier to run it all off.
You don't heat honey up in the hot tub?
I don't have a hot tub. Oh. I'm not rich like you, Logan.
I don't either. I use my neighbors. They look at me funny.
Well, that's because you use it naked.
It's for the honey.
Anyways. So another way to increase your mash efficiency actually is something that not a lot of people do. A lot of people, get their mash in and then they start recirculating right off the bat. Actually stirring several times over the course of the first 20 minutes of your mash helps quite a bit.
Yeah, so most 5-gallon mash tuns are not going to be very good at holding a specific temperature in any specific spot. So stirring that mash is really going to keep that temperature a lot more consistent. So you don't have spots that might be down at 140 and other spots that might be at 155. And so that's going to really help you just kind of keep a consistent temperature throughout the mash. Also, you won't get these spots where, you might have a high sugar content or a high enzyme content if you didn't, mix up your base malt and your specialty malts very well. So stirring is never a bad thing to do.
Yeah, you're giving your enzymes a boost up basically by making sure they're getting in contact with all the bits that they need to get in contact, and then hopefully making sure, like you said, that your temperature is consistent. And a lot of people are afraid to do that because they're like, oh, I'm going to get all these oxidized beta-glucans from my mash. That doesn't actually happen, and then you can also get a lot of filtration if you just boil off after that first 20 minutes. So just recirculate your mash after that first 20 minutes, and you'll still get some crystal clear, beautiful wort coming out. Let's talk about mash thickness. Somebody already asked the question a little bit about mash thickness, and it is dependent. And so we're going to talk about kind of a scenario where you might use a thinner mash and a scenario that you might use a thinner mash, thicker mash.
I mash to whatever fits.
That's true.
So, I mean, obviously the thick mash scenario is you are brewing a barley wine, and you have 25 pounds of grain to fit in a 10-gallon vessel, right?
Right.
You're pretty much going to have to do a thick mash, but you also might want to do a thick mash if, again, you have a really high adjunct beer that you're trying to concentrate those enzymes as much as possible. Thinner mashes, while they can actually make sparging a bit easier for you, they will dilute your enzymes. So if you don't have a really high enzymatic base malt to work with, then you might actually take a little bit longer to get that conversion that you're looking for.
Yeah, I think we had a 800 and something pound grain bill that we tried to fit into a big mash tun that definitely could not fit it. We needed to do a very thick mash, and we also ended up batch sparging that. But one thing that you got to take into account when you're choosing whether to do a thick or a thin mash is the end result of your efficiency and making sure you have enough sparge water. So on those high alcohol beers, making sure that your mash that's in there has enough time to do what it's going to do. And then when you run off that mash, there's not going to be very much liquid, and hopefully you saved enough of your sparge water that you can really get those sugars rinsed off.
Yeah.
Because in those high alcohol beers, it's super easy to leave sugars behind.
Oh yeah. I mean, you're gonna leave some sugars behind regardless, but yeah, you want to try to maximize that as much as possible. I mean, shoot, in that last batch of Count Chocula, it was probably still 1030 OG that we were leaving in there when we had to cut our mash.
Yep, we still got decent efficiency though.
Yeah,
I mean,
when you're talking about a 1090 something beer, then it's a little different.
As a general rule, the smaller your beer, the lower alcohol your beer, the thinner your mash is going to be.
Yeah, and one thing to consider though, if you do go super thin, say you're doing like a brew in a bag, full volume method. If you're doing a very pale beer, you do have to start taking into consideration your pH. And you're probably, if you're not doing it already, that's probably a point where it's a good idea to either add some acidulated malt or some kind of an acid addition, just so that you're not getting that pH too high, and because that will definitely affect your mash efficiency. There we go.
And we got a couple people, it looks like, talking about beta amylase degradation. Somebody found something that said it denatures at 158. I've seen things that say beta amylase denatures at up to 160, 165 in that range. But if you look at the curve, it actually denatures surprisingly fast at the lower end of the 150 spectrum.
Yeah, so it's a curve. Yeah, it'll start to denature. I think it's like 149 is when it actually starts. But then it just obviously, as you get hotter and hotter, it'll denature faster and faster.
Surprisingly, even alpha amylase is denaturing at the same temperature that it's working most efficiently. It's just it's a slower denaturing process. But beta amylase in that higher, the study that I read was it was about 8 years ago it came out, and it was just looking at the amount of beta amylase that was in your mash. If you mash in at 154, and it was like within 5 minutes, it was severely depleted. So it does still denature at those lower temperatures, but it'll give you a hard denature point at that 160.
Yeah, I was going to say about 160. Yeah, that's like you said. It's like within a few minutes, you're pretty much toast. Which, if you do want to make, you can actually use that to your advantage too. Kind of a side note, but say you're brewing some kind of a true sour, or any sour beer actually that you're going to throw some kind of bugs at. Yeah. I've done that on purpose before. I've done 160, even 165 mashes just to purposely leave a whole bunch of starches left in there so that the, whatever Brettanomyces or other kind of bugs I'm throwing at it have something to chew on.
Not up, people.
Thank you, people. Dang it.
All right.
It's probably not a real call anyway.
It looked like it was an actual cell phone.
Oh, weird. Why would they be calling us at 9 o'clock? Okay.
I don't know.
Anyway, let's get back to our topic here.
Here's a couple things you can try actually with those high alcohol beers, the beers that might be difficult to get full mash efficiency. There are actually a couple techniques you can use to try to maximize what you get off of, first of all, your high alcohol mash, and then also maybe get some little extra beer also on the side.
So yeah, the first technique to do is going to be just double mashing, which might actually be the only option for a lot of you out there if you have a smaller mash tun and you're trying to brew a barley wine or something of that nature where the grains won't fit in your mash tun. It's perfectly okay to do 2 separate mashes and then just sparge both of those off into the same vessel. Nice thing about that is that you're probably going to be doing an extended boil anyway. So it's really not going to make your brew day that much longer to basically do a single mash, bring that up to a boil while you're doing your second mash, and then drain that sucker out and boil it even more. So a couple even 3 Howard boil isn't uncommon for something like that.
So with the double mash, you can definitely increase. That's what you're just talking about, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can definitely increase your initial alcohol percentage, but you're also going to, or your initial gravity going into your kettle, but you're also probably going to have a lot of residual sugars left in your mash, at the end of the day. So if you don't want to do, you'll end up doing a long boil regardless, but if you wanted to do something else with some of the residual worth you're going to have without necessarily increasing your boil time by astronomical margins, you can also take that out into a party gal.
Yeah, I love to party.
Guy.
Oh.
And that was a great joke. We're
Yep.
so good at jokes.
No, I've done this with all kinds of big beers, actually. Because you have so much sugars left in your fermenter, you can usually actually squeak out a second batch of beer. For a 5-gallon batch, I've usually kind of shot for more of like a 3-gallon batch as my second batch.
Yeah.
You can kind of cheat it by adding some malt extract too. But a lot of times you can get, either somewhere between 3 to 5 gallons by just continuing to sparge of about a 1030 OG beer.
Fine session beer.
Yeah, so a little bit of extra sugar, maybe bump that up with just a pound or two of extract, and now you have a really nice session beer. I did, what did I do? Oh, one of the best Schwarz beers I actually ever made was by doing that with a big old Doppelbock. Yeah, so yeah, it's definitely kind of a really fun thing. You can kind of get a little 2-for-1 special out of that without a lot of extra time investment. So
yeah. And then we have one more tip for those of you that are trying to get the most out of your mash. This is something that not a lot of people have really experimented with because it kind of seems like cheating, or it seems like uncharted territory. It's foreign to people, and that is actually try playing around with added enzymes to your mash.
Yeah, so especially the last, I feel like, year or so, all of a sudden there's all these different enzymes that are popping up on the market. That different variations of alpha and beta, and shoot, we even got a beta glucanase, right?
Yep, we got a beta glucanase.
So there's all these different enzymes that are becoming available now, and so playing with those in your mash, say you want to make sure your beer is really clear, we've got beta glucanase you can throw at that and make sure that there's no proteins left in there.
It'll also increase your efficiency by making it so that you don't risk channeling as much.
Yeah, or you throw AMG, the same thing that you're throwing into a brut IPA, throw that in a little bit towards the end of your mash. You can drop those points down. You can end up with a really nice dry beer. You can that'll end up not making a full brut because you're going to denature that during the boil. But say you're doing an big old West Coast IPA and you want to go all grain with it, instead of adding corn sugar, you could actually add a little bit of that, and that'll drop a 1065, 1070 beer down to 1.006 or something just crazy low like that.
Yeah.
So there's a few different ways of getting where you want to be. All right, and I think, is that it?
That's all the tips that I had written down for the mashing. If you've got any questions on any of those tips or anything aside from that you'd like to throw at us, feel free. Do we want to aim for a second topic or just go straight into Q&A?
I think there's a lot of questions popping up right now, so we might just have to go straight into Q&A.
All right. Q&A time.
Yeah, I see people, lots of people. Thank you for commenting, though. Thanks for tuning in.
Yeah, thanks
Everybody
for jumping in,
give us
guys.
a like right now if you're tuned in, by the way. And, let me just
Hit
cover
that thumbie uppy button.
few questions that were thrown out there earlier on in the live stream. I almost said podcast.
Yeah,
Not a podcast.
Oh, it's a podcast. We rip out the audio and turn it into a podcast.
And somebody was asking about Barber Rouge hops. And we actually have some of those, and they're not in a beer yet, are they?
They're not in a beer yet.
Not in a beer yet, but I believe within the next couple weeks we will actually be putting those in a beer. And then also for the Dill Pickle Beer Challenge with Homebrew for Life, we are doing that.
Yes.
I have to get some pickles first, though. Or actually make pickles, I guess. I don't know. I grow a lot of veggies at my house, so I got some dill that I just planted.
We're gonna get some good garnishes on this guy.
Yeah, gotta get the garnish on there. And then a great question.
Fun to try as a red beer too, actually.
Yeah, a great question actually was how to fix watery beer. Somebody was mentioned that they did a smash beer, and it just turned out, I'm guessing the body itself of the beer is just very, very thin, but it sounds like it's already in the package or kegged up, So the only thing I would say you can You can blend in a few things afterwards, but it is one of the more difficult things to fix on the back end. I know I've had that issue in the past.
Kind of depends on the beer. I think one way to do it would be to just AMG it, just zyme it down to 0 and call it a brute, and then high carbonate. So then you get the texture of the carbonation. But that would depend if it has any flavor to back it up. So you definitely want some sort of hopping structure in there too.
Yeah.
But you can like Logan said, you can also blend beers back into it. Sometimes that helps, and then you're saving your volume. But
I would say that's probably the best thing to do is take a beer that's naturally kind of thicker and chewier and actually blend it back in with that one. I know I've tried, I've tried adding like maltose or the maltodextrin, which is something that people usually add to beers to give it a little bit more body, but they'll typically add that in the
During
boil.
the boil,
Yeah, kind of on the front end of things. And I've tried to add that to the back end, and it just didn't really work out very well for me.
Maltodextrin also has kind of a flat flavor.
Yeah.
But there's also one thing that we've used in lieu of maltodextrin to add some thickness and residual sweetness is we've used monk fruit extract or monk fruit sugars. That's a non-fermentable. It adds sweetness and a little bit of the perception of maltiness to the beer, and it does actually give you a little bit more body and head retention as well.
Yeah, and I think that's probably between blending it back into beers and adding something like monk fruit or even some stevia. I feel like the monk fruit would actually be better because that monk fruit definitely added body to that fruit that we put it in. So that's probably the best way to kind of attack that. And it sounds like if it's a smash, I feel like that monk fruit would work really well with it. So yeah, there you go. How to fix watery beer. All right. What's our next questions?
Best jingle ever. Thanks, Frazzled Penguin. I think we do have. I'm way up at the top from the beginning of the live stream trying to scroll through all these.
Oh.
Someone mashed up to like 20 or 82 degrees Celsius for a couple. Is it going to ruin the beer? It won't entirely ruin the beer. So a lot of malts actually have a surprising amount of ready to dissolve fermentable sugars in them. That's one of the nice things about highly modified malts these days. So you'll still make beer, but it'll definitely finish thicker. Unless 82 is like scorching high, in which case I don't think that wouldn't be scorching high. Yeah, you're probably fine.
People are talking all about efficiencies on here. 85% is a pretty epic efficiency.
Yeah.
I will note on that, we have a lot of homebrewers come in and talk about these high efficiencies on how they hit 85 and 90% efficiencies. And that is sort of an easily confused topic because there's a lot of different ways to measure efficiency. On a commercial scale, we always measure what's called the brew house efficiency, which is
final beer efficiency.
Yes, final beer efficiency. So that is basically you have a set amount of potential sugars in your grains, and it's how much of those potential sugars actually end up in your fermenter in beer wort. And you have losses all the way along there. And
losses in your pipes, losses in the bottom of your mash tun, losses in your fermenter even going into package.
Yeah, and I know on a homebrew scale, the best I have ever done, I think, was in about that 85%. And that was from a decocted beer that was planned on only being about 4.5%. There's basically no way you're going to hit that if you're doing any kind of IPA, just because your hop absorption itself will probably be about 10% losses.
Yeah.
So that's why. So there is something to be said with that. Kind of the caveat with somebody comes bragging about super high efficiencies. If you're doing it right, anywhere between 70 and 80% is usually what you see. I personally, I know I focus on. I don't really care about getting a high efficiency so much as getting a consistent efficiency, because that's one thing that will drive me nuts is if I'm planning on something that's 1 gravity and it comes out either way low or way high.
In which case you add more water.
Yep.
Hell's Brew says, cheers, super hungover today. Right there with you, buddy. Go ahead and slam a morning chug for us. Actually, or watch last week's live stream where we talk about curing a hangover.
Yeah, there you
go. Also, everyone go subscribe to his channel right now. Brew. Have we brewed with the new Samba hop blend from BSG? No, but I was looking at that, and I plan on maybe bringing it in, but maybe not.
Expensive?
Yeah.
Why is everything
It's not that expensive. It was like, it wasn't terrible. It's like in the Citra expensive range, not in the Galaxy expensive range. But yeah, I'm also hesitant to bring in hops unless people are already asking for them to buy, just because we have tons of hops here, and it's hard to get through them all.
Stackhouse is asking about doing a coconut lime Berliner with K97, but he's rethinking about doing the Voss strain for a Quake. And I think either way, actually, you should be all right there.
The Voss fruitiness will definitely kind of help punch up the liminess, I think.
Yeah.
And then you're kind of sweetening it with the coconut, so you should be fine there. It's gonna be there's a lot of flavors going on. Definitely the more consistent and malt leaning flavor would be if you use the K97.
Yeah.
Give you that nice fluffiness, but I could see it either way. Two different beers, but two beers that could both potentially be good.
And I think one tip I will give you there is we've been playing with a fairly new hop variety called Sabro, and I feel like regardless if you did a moderate dry hop, maybe just an ounce or two for a 5-gallon batch of Sabro at the end, might actually really push through that coconut profile because that hop comes across really coconutty.
I love dry hop sours just in general. I think it's a phenomenal way to give balance to the beer. And then Sabro is just one of those hops that's going to really, really come across pungently. It works out well in the dry hop.
Yep.
Someone suggesting that we do a Flame Out / Whirlpool with Ella and Galaxy. We have both those hops in stock right now, so that might happen soon.
Ella and Galaxy. Those are random ones.
Yeah, the Aussie, the Australian.
Yeah,
definitely.
Ella, formerly Stella, which I was kind of bummed about because that's my dog's name. Actually, that is a good hop, honestly. Ella is a good hop, but I usually use it in like traditional pilsners and stuff.
Yeah.
Hence probably why they had to change the name. Actually, Stella Artois was probably like, "What are you guys?"
That's
doing?
exactly what happened.
Yeah, they were like,
"That's exactly
"Hey guys,
what happened." Yeah.
Hey guys.
Stella Artois was all like, "Hey, you stealing my name for your hop?
Yeah.
You can't do that."
They're like, "We actually use your hop, but wouldn't surprise me."
Yeah,
because it is a high alpha, right?
Stella wouldn't use Ella hops.
Yeah,
that's way too expensive.
That's true.
Someone's talking about juice being a finicky yeast. Turns out Imperial recommends extra oxygen. Nice.
Yeah.
We use oxygen in all our beers, so.
Yeah, I don't know that I've ever actually had an issue with juice stalling out on me.
Yeah.
It's usually pretty consistent.
But we take really good care of our yeast. That's like the number one thing that we will tell everyone to do every single time is do everything possible to take care of your yeast. So
I know it had to
I know a lot of people direct pitch or like try to direct pitch, and so if you direct pitch, then maybe that might be why you have different experiences with juice than we do. But it's been super consistent for us.
Yeah, we also ferment on the little bit higher side. I do know that one does like the higher temperature. So if you do end up kind of like we suggested for the amber ale,
lower, if you ferment it on the lower end, then you gotta do some coaxing.
Yeah, you might want to still. I would just say still ferment it for your 4 or 5 days. Once it gets through the bulk of that, then maybe raise it up to 70 just to make sure that she doesn't stall out on you. So, all right.
Someone's saying he doesn't oxygenate juice and still's been working good for him. I think it's a good yeast.
All right, lots of stuff coming in. Have we fermented in the mash and boil? Any issues while doing this?
We did ferment with. We have that on video actually.
Yeah, we've done it a couple times.
A kettle sour one. It's like a 24-minute video where we kind of walk through a kettle souring process that we did on the mash and boil, and that was a fantastic beer.
We also fermented the Stein beer in there too, because remember we left the rock in. And
well, that was in the anvil, but same kind of
same kind of thing. We had Tim clean out one of them, and we forgot there was still a rock in there. It was a fun surprise for him. But yeah, no, it works really well. There's no issues at all with, especially because those have a little bit higher volume. The only thing I would say is treat them like a bucket fermenter. Don't let beer sit in there for too long. I know for like that Stein beer, we gave it. I don't even think it was a week. I think it was 5 or 6 days. When it was more or less slowed down bubbling, we got it right into a corny keg and then let it condition in that keg. So just don't leave it sit for too long. I wouldn't go like a 3 or 4 week fermentation, and that again is just because of the headspace in there. You end up getting sucked back and risk contamination.
They might not be 100% airtight. I'm not sure. I know you can distill in them, so maybe, but the mash and boils I would try to use a fermenter an actual fermenter whenever possible. Yeah. Just, if nothing else, to keep them easier to clean for your next brew.
Yep, exactly, because they are kind of a pain in the butt to clean sometimes.
Some people be doing overnight mashes. We do overnight mashes a lot, actually.
We do.
That's one of the ways we ramp. We'll mash in at 145 or even lower, and then we'll just throw it through the Herms coil that we were telling you guys about earlier, and then come back the next morning and have 2 halves of a brew day, which is a lot more manageable when you're running a full-fledged business at the same time.
Michael Bowman is asking about the efficiencies of the brew in a basket systems. And our experience is that they tend to be on the low side. They do tend to be nice and consistent, though, especially the ones with the pumps on them.
When you're doing high ABV beers, then the efficiency really drops out.
Yeah.
For low ABV beers, I think they work fine, because especially if they've got a recirculation system.
Yeah. For high ABV beers, you definitely have to do extended boils with them. And again, I think that's more a volume and low boil off rate than anything else. But yeah, we've had they seem to be I would say right around that 70, a little bit higher than 70% for most efficiencies that we're getting out of them, and that'll vary a little bit depending on your batch.
Someone is asking thoughts on using a brew in a bag as an additional filter for an igloo cooler. Worth it or unnecessary / harmful? If you already have a false bottom, I would say that's harmful / unnecessary. If you don't have a false bottom, then you should be planning to batch sparge with that, in which case it could work. I've seen it done.
Yeah.
Now I'm just out the regular. I know somebody who never even built a mash tun. He just had an igloo cooler that was an igloo cooler, and he brewed and bagged it, and then just went out the regular little button port on the front. And that works. But you got to batch sparge if you do that.
Yeah, I was going to say, because you'll get super, super crazy channeling if you don't have some kind of manifold or false bottom.
Yeah, just the way it flows is going to be very, very impeded.
Zappa hops. Ooh, I have not even heard of Zappa hops until now.
I have. I haven't bought them yet. Surprising, right? There's something I haven't bought yet.
Oh, great. Thanks. Now there's another thing Peter's going to buy.
Frazzled Penguin, you mentioned fly sparging over an hour if you have a robo brew and keep a half-inch layer of water on top while sparging. At that rate, it takes about 20 to 30 minutes. Should I try to slow that down? Not sure how. No, I think you're fine. A lot of those vertical brew systems are actually really difficult to get a slow fly sparge. We actually kind of just let them drain and then pour a bunch of water over them.
Yeah,
we
those
do
ones,
that.
There's not really a way to manage it. So
we know we're going to lose efficiency on it. Yeah, that's mostly for if you have like a 3-vessel system that we say that hour fly sparge system is going to work.
Yeah. Oh, here we go. Roger is asking about the olive oil conundrum.
Oh, that's a myth.
Yeah, that is actually a myth. It's
supposed to have. So basically, what it has is the same thing that creates cell walls. So yeast basically can only create new cell walls or create new yeast under the presence of oxygen, because there's a compound that's created very early on during what's called lag phase. That same compound is very, very high and potent in olive oil. However, in olive oil, they're inaccessible. Olive oil will not oxygenate your beer or substitute for oxygen. Yeah. Yeast does not actually like oil, so don't do it.
Yeah, and I want to say,
originally it worked in theory, but not in practice.
Well, and I want to say, like, call me out on this, but somebody actually sat down and did the math because of the insolubility of it, and so you don't have the yeast can't get to it, and so in order to put enough that you would have it actually dissolve to where the yeast could get to it, it was some ridiculous amount, like several ounces in there, to the point where it would completely ruin your beer. So yeah, that was kind of the whole thing with that, where it's like, hey, look, I did some numbers, but in reality it doesn't work out that way. So
just don't use it.
Yeah.
Someone's saying they used a first runnings for a dark beer to make a porter, and the second as a mild. That is a great idea. We love milds.
Yeah.
They taste awesome.
I do love milds.
Someone has been using amyloglucosidase to add to the sack Brett lacto fermenter to bottle in 6 days. Damn, that sounds dangerous, but you know, I'm excited.
Handle bottles with care.
Yeah. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of precursors that there are a lot of things that your Brett can ferment that are surprising. They're not sugars, so they're not really going to add to your gravity. But that Brett will keep fermenting stuff in the bottle. So
yeah,
hopefully it tastes good though. That's one of the things I haven't tried that, so I don't know. But that sounds like it'd be fun.
Yeah. Somebody's asking about Idaho 7 and how to best use it. I mean, any hop forward beer. It's a great balanced hop. Nothing that like really jumps out that's like, oh yeah, this screams this, that, or the other thing. But yeah, it's just a really nice balanced hop. I think it'll actually work well in a smash. You'll learn a lot about it, and that'll let you you'll probably want to add more hops to it in the future, but it'll let you learn really the profile of it. So. As for Chris is saying that he got pretty low efficiencies with brew in a bag, only 50 to 60%. And I think kind of like we mentioned earlier, that's probably an enzyme dilution rate issue. So you're either going to have to kind of do a longer mash rest, or actually add a few extra enzymes to that.
Yeah, or just do a lot of stirring.
Yeah,
more stirring than you think you need. But it's basically what he's saying with enzyme dilution is there's too much area for the enzymes to swim around in, so they're not getting to the sugars fast enough. Basically, it's taking too long for enzymes to go from one sugar chain to the next sugar chain, which really, really slows down that efficiency.
Yeah, you a lot of times you'll get low efficiency for at least higher gravity beers with brew in a bag. But yeah, 50%, you should definitely be getting. You should still be getting in that at least, I would say 65%, I think is the lowest I've ever gotten. With that said, I've hit like I think it was like an English mild I was doing all grain. I think I hit almost like 80% or 81%. So yeah, that's going to depend a lot on the beer. That might make sense if you're doing a brew in a bag for like a barley wine, but that's probably not the best method for a style like that anyway.
Holy crap, there's a lot of comments.
Dang,
I'm just
people.
just now getting down to something. Okay.
Dark sours? Yes.
Love dark sours.
Malts to pair with the Brett strain. Special B is your friend. Yeah, for something like a sour, because it's gonna any sweetness that might have is definitely gonna like destroy that with Brett, and yeah. So yeah, Special B.
Maybe some chocolate wheat, something that's
maybe
fruitier.
I was gonna say don't get too aggressive on the roastiness, just because it might come through like way too much, but yeah,
because it's gonna dry out, and so those roast flavors are gonna pop a lot. I really like chocolate wheat, especially in sour beers, because chocolate wheat is naturally fruity and it still has that chocolate tone without any of the assertion of a roasted barley or a black malt or even carafa. It's way fruitier and sweeter than that.
Oh, Simon says he won a beer competition with the Stella Galaxy combo.
Congrats.
Very nice.
Zachary Johnson says he's brewed probably 6 batches. Before he started brewing, he had drank quite a bit of high-quality beers and having issues liking his own. That's not uncommon. Anything that he thinks we think would help him make better beer. So watch our 5 tips videos and make sure that you're doing all that. Yeast health is the number one most important thing. That said, depending on the styles of beers that you're making, equipment actually can play a pretty big role. But you can make really good beers on cheap equipment. You just got to make the beers that are right for the equipment that you have. That's a much, much longer topic, but hopefully that helps at least a little bit, and letting you know that there's still a chance.
Perfect.
Kevin Rabe says his beers have been slightly astringent. How do I fix this? That kind of depends on where the astringency is coming from. A lot of times I've seen the most common astringent flavor comes from hops. There also can be astringency that can come from polyphenols.
I was going to say water might be another thing.
Yeah, water source. If you're just looking to mask it, just brew sweeter beers. But the better way to do it is try to look into why it's astringent. Is it astringent because of a lot of plant material or hops that in there? Is it astringent like if you were to bite on a Band-Aid or a piece of plastic kind of astringent?
Is it like sucking on a tea bag?
Yeah, is it sucking on a tea bag, which is tannic astringent?
Yeah, there's a lot of that's tricky. That's an open-ended one there for sure. Somebody's talking about sapwood cellars.
I'm looking for a mash tun for step mashing for sours. Any ideas? Should I go old school with strainer, plate, and kettle? So other than the kind of pseudo Herms system, the janky way that we were describing earlier in this live stream, just something like a mash and boil or a Robo Brew or an Anvil Foundry that has the pump and recirculation kit. That's the easiest way to be able to do step mashes. And they're really neat, simple systems. So I endorse them.
Otherwise, you can kind of decoct some stuff too. That just takes more time and is a pain in the butt to clean up.
If you want to spend 10 hours on a brew day, then I totally recommend decoction.
It does darken the living daylights out of a beer.
Any items that we would recommend adding to the mash rather than the boil or fermenter to get the desired flavors, things like fruit purees or other flavoring agents. There are some things that we do add to the mash. So it's going to be mostly starchy things. Mangoes can actually go really well in a mash, but leaves a lot of the flavors of mangoes behind. Mangoes actually also have enzymes that help break down grains, and they can give kind of a soft profile to the overall thing, but you won't taste mangoes. If you want to get flavors off of fruit and stuff, the easiest way to do it is to add it post-fermentation.
Ooh, peach puree in a wheat beer.
Sounds delightful.
Yes. How much, though? That is the question. How much flavor do you want? Peaches are pretty mellow, so I would say more than you might think. Actually, I'm trying to think of like volume versus weight. Probably like, I want to say half gallon would be like a good starting point.
I'd do it in pounds.
Yeah,
Yeah, a
whatever
half
that
gallon would definitely
converts
be.
to pounds.
Yeah, I was gonna say what's it? Yeah, somewhere between a quart and a half gallon. It's probably depending on where the puree comes from. That's probably gonna be anywhere between 3 and 6 pounds.
Yeah, so yeah, generally more than you might think, just because peaches are going to be very subtle. If you're going for that subtle character, though, then yeah.
I'm finally down to the coconut Berliner comment.
Nice. Yeah, so yeah, peach puree is a tricky one because I have not used it before, but I do know peaches come across pretty subtly in a beer. So
how efficient is using the brew in a basket system like claw hammer with recirculation of the wort during the mash and no sparge at the end compared to using a cooler mash tun? Depends. There's a lot of techniques you can do to make those kind of systems works. I haven't used the brew in a basket system that claw hammer has, but I'm assuming it's similar to a lot of the coffee can style systems we've got, like the Anvil. You can definitely make them work and make them just as efficient, but in general, they're going to be a little bit less efficient than something like a 3-tier system where you've got a cooler, sparge, or a hot liquor tank and a brew kettle.
Yeah, somebody's getting some serious blow off. It sounds like from a yeast that they've harvested up from 5 generations.
Oh, nice.
Fun facts: when you harvest your yeast, you end up with more cells than what you started with.
That'll definitely blow some tops.
I've done that before, where I keep a starter going, and then my starter blows up on me, and it's like, dang it.
MJ here, Gurhaje1. He said it's MJ. I'm guessing that's for Michael Johnson. I'm assuming Michael Johnson watches our live streams. It says, any plans for another product review of a cheap Amazon/eBay brewing product? I loved the last one. We do have plans to do that, but we don't know the timeline. We've got a list of videos we've got to get done first. So we're kind of figuring that out. I would say it's probably not going to come within the next month or two. After that, probably soon.
Yeah. Ooh, here's a good question. So Frazzled Penguin's asking about using the beer softwares and their sparge water calculators. And what I would say, so your equipment is almost always going to be different than what they originally calculate.
Yeah.
With that said, choose some simple beer, amber ale, American pale ale, some beer that's kind of got a lot of wiggle
I like
room.
the amber ale. You should do an amber ale with Caribbean, Equinaut, and juice yeast.
Some beer that's got a lot of wiggle room for your kind of volumes and efficiencies. And then what I've done when I'm dialing in at least a brand new system that I'm getting set up is basically do what they suggest the very first time and just follow that to a T. And then just take notes of everything that's going on, and then what you end up with volumes and efficiencies with at the end of the day, and then go back and adjust those calculations for whether you overshot or undershot things.
It's important to note that what Logan is suggesting you do and what Logan actually does are two completely different things.
Hey, I used to do that.
His first time on a system, he's like, that looks about right. Let's just go for it.
Well, that's just because now I'm a savant, so it's not my fault.
That's true. They do come a little bit easier.
You
these
kind
days.
of are too.
When you do this stuff enough, when you've brewed literally thousands of beers before,
when you can eyeball 200 gallons and be like, oh yeah, look at that, I was off by like 5 gallons, sweet.
I still can't believe we did so good on that giant Count Chocula mash. Yeah, 850 pounds will totally fit. We'll make this happen. Literally to the brim with the exact right mash temperature.
All right, you had to put like a double elbow thing. That was we had to cheat it a little bit,
and it was awesome. Have we looked into systems? I don't know if that's. Oh, that's Jeff. Okay, not talking to me. Cool. Mostly do full volume sparge. 427 smash, super woody, fun experiment, but maybe not our favorite beer. Time to add strawberry syrup. I don't know, Hayden. You should probably bring me a bottle and let me know. We just got in some 427. I'm excited to try it.
K Berry is asking about whether you can double crush for doing a brew in a bag. You can. It shouldn't really be necessary though. I know
a lot of people ask for a double crush.
Yeah,
but I mean, it depends on your mill, honestly.
Yeah, if you've got your mill dialed in, then you really shouldn't have to double crush.
I should add that we have a 3-roller mill. So
yeah, I was gonna say, so it's kind of getting crushed anyway. So
yeah,
but yeah, no, that shouldn't really affect anything. Yeah, you'll get a little bit of bits that kind of fall down through through the bag, but I haven't ever, had noticed when I've done brew in a bags any kind of like negative impacts from grain material. So, yeah. Oh yeah, there you go. And Chris already answered it. Depends on your bag.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If it's a super, super thin bag, then maybe avoid that. Or super fine mesh, I mean.
Yeah. Yeah, just because it might stick up in there.
Dr. Han says he doesn't like Galaxy. That's blasphemy. I don't mind that you don't like Galaxy. We have a video slated for, 5 hops that are better than Galaxy? Coming out soon.
Oh, yeah. We shot that, and it was not very good.
Yeah, we shot it, and the audio was terrible. It was great content, but now we need to redo that video. So comment what you think your favorite hop that's not Galaxy is. That you would spend literally half the price as Galaxy on. Galaxy's so expensive right now.
It is stupidly expensive.
Washing and reusing yeast, tips on how many times you would do that and when to toss. 9% ABV beer and dry hopped beers is tossing. Yes, if you're doing high alcohol beers, it's not a good growth medium. If you're doing super hoppy beers, it's not a good growth medium. What we like to do is we like to plan out 2 or 3 batches in a row. We usually don't try to push it more than that. We'll actually literally plan out a step up. So we'll do a light beer, a medium beer, and then maybe one really high alcohol beer after we've grown a ton of yeast.
Yeah.
After that, we really don't want to stress it too much. And yeast is relatively cheap, so it's really not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
Again, take care of your yeast and don't risk things.
Michael is asking about how the alpha and beta amylases influence beer and whether that's something to be worried about and to monitor. And I would say, we actually did a video a while ago on this, but in a nutshell, if you mash high, you are going to end up with a beer that finishes high, so you're going to end up with a lower alcohol beer. If you mash low, you're going to end up with a higher alcohol beer per the same grains. It doesn't seem to affect body as much as everybody will tell you. Your body's kind of more or less there regardless. So yeah, that's why we tend to just shoot on the lower end of the mash and then build up that body with whatever malts we're putting in the beer.
Yep.
So,
do we ramp up fermentation temperatures for all yeasts? We do it pretty consistently for most yeasts. And so what we'll do is we'll kind of start on the lower end, make sure we've got a really healthy pitch so it takes hold. If it's a finicky yeast, like it might like to fall asleep, sometimes we'll start kind of in the medium-high range and then drop the temperature during fermentation. But at the end of fermentation, almost all the time we let it go up to a temperature that's going to make sure that we don't get any VDKs. That's like diacetyl or 1,5-pentane diol. And then also just to make sure that we're finishing out fermentation on a schedule. So a lot of times if you don't do that ramp up, you'll end up with just a slightly extra sweet beer. Just because it didn't have time or the energy in the system to finish out. That said, if you've got a really strong workhorse of a yeast, a lot of times it doesn't need it, but we do it on most of our yeasts.
Yeah. There's certain strains that just go bonkers and are done super fast, and other strains that definitely need a little bit more love. Azaka, nice. Strata's the one we haven't used a lot, actually. We should use that more.
We've got it. I've bought it.
All right. Good old Cascade and Centennial. Somebody's going after my heart. The old school hops.
Love it. Columbus, Cascade, Centennial.
I was like, yeah, I think Columbus is still my favorite hop.
Columbus is probably one of my favorite hops. I always say Willamette's my favorite hop. I don't know if it actually is, but
yeah.
I just refuse to say one of the new Superfruit hops is my favorite.
But Superfruit, it sells. All right. Well, thank you for everyone for tuning in today. I think it's about time to say goodbye for the week. I don't see any more questions popping up.
There's probably some of that's if we do a raw NEPA, no boil mash only.
Budweiser mashes for 3 hours apparently. I'm sure Budweiser's adding enzymes too.
Doing a raw New England IPA is possible. Not easy, but possible.
Yeah.
And actually, there's a brewery locally that does it a lot.
Big C. Mount Hood. All right, that's a random one.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, it looks like we've got. I know there's probably some questions that we missed, but please tune in to next week's live stream. It is time for us to start working on getting open. So, we've got to actually run a business here. And if you haven't already, please see there's 160 of you out there. Please hit that like button for us. Make sure we get this video a lot of likes, because that helps the video go farther and helps us out a little bit. And yeah, tune in next week. We do this every single week at 8:45 a.m. on Sundays. And we talk about some cool stuff. We get to hang out with you guys. Yeah, Pacific Standard Time. No, 8:45, whatever time you're at.
Whatever time. You'll find a video.
Subscribe to our channel. If you guys are out there enjoying our content right now, please give us a subscribe to the channel. We like to get those little boosts. It helps us quite a bit. And then CH from Homebrew for Life wants to do a sub war first to 100K. So we got to win.
All right, yeah, we're going against them. Everybody give a like right now. I see there's still 160 you tuned in, so thank you all for watching today. As usual, always a great conversation to have. We'll see you next week. Oh man, they're still now everybody's shooting out hops. LD, I love LD.